Welcome to the Moon Magic Tarot channel. Thank you so much for joining me for this How to Manifest with the Moon video. Today we're going to be talking about the last quarter moon, and in particular the last quarter moon that takes place on Saturday and Sunday, the weekend of the 17th and the 18th of September. Now, I think the dynamics today, or at this weekend, are going to be potentially quite emotionally driven. I think emotions are going to override logic. So this is a time, I think, where mindfulness could be really, really valuable for us. We'll look at the dynamics specifically in just a moment. When we work with manifesting with the moon, we're always working with the various layers of lunar information. So we'll be looking at the phase of the moon, which is the last quarter, the zodiac sign that the moon is passing through with void of course periods as well. And then we will look at the connections with the other planets and what I call the soul growth layer, which is where we look at the influence and energy of the tree law, the Celtic tree law, and the tribal wisdom. So this particular last quarter moon will pass between Gemini and Cancer with a massive 10-hour void of course period in between, along with aligning with some of the really quite significant and powerful planetary collaborations that are going on. A void of course period, for anyone that's not sure what that means, a void of course period is when the moon moves from one sign to another, but there's a space in between. She doesn't necessarily go straight from Gemini into Cancer. And when she's in that space in between, the energy is very interesting because it can actually really feel very liberating. Her influence isn't being channeled through the personality of a particular sign. But it can also leave us feeling a little bit out at sea and lacking in direction. So given that there are some very emotional dynamics for this particular last quarter moon anyway, I think this is going to be interesting. The last quarter moon is the point when the moon has completed her waning gibbous moon phase, and she's actually at a 90-degree angle with the sun in relation to the earth. So there's always, in astrological terms, she's in a square with the sun. Every quarter moon offers us a point of review. It's like it's a point of evaluation. That's what the energy is inviting. The first quarter is always inviting us in many ways to look at how we are accelerating, what we're investing into our external world. The last quarter moon has a very different energy. It is about review, but it's a turning point where we're shifting away from accelerating in the external world and we're bringing our review point to look within. So it's a turning point when we can assess and review and actually, very interestingly, really look at ourselves as the source of any change in our world. So how does this fit with what I call the soul growth layer? I always feel as though understanding the tribal wisdom and the tree law that's associated with each of the phases of the moon as we go through the year really, for me, helps me to stand back and get an overview of things, to sort of get a greater understanding of the kind of life lessons that I'm being offered at a level of soul growth. And this is really, really helpful if you've got anything going on in your world that feels a bit wobbly or even significantly challenging. We're currently in the 9th moon phase of this year, which is governed by the tree law of Hazel and also by Setting Sun Woman, who is the keeper of future dreams, the keeper of tomorrow's dreams. So because the last quarter moon is asking us to reflect and see ourselves as the source of change, we are really about, at this point in time for this review, asking ourselves, am I walking my talk? Are my actions, thoughts, words in alignment with the world that I wish to see and the world that I wish to create? Setting Sun Woman really aligns beautifully with this exact energy, because this tribal moon phase actually asks us to do exactly the same, to review, to evaluate, to really align our actions in ways that mean we've learned from the past. And because we've learned from the past, we can grow and create a better future for ourselves and for future generations yet to come. And the tree law of Hazel works in this way as well. Hazel is an extraordinarily resilient wood. It's an extraordinarily resilient tree, and it's very, very generous. If we cut it back and coppice it, it grows back and gives us more. So it's kind of always in a cycle where it offers us things, it gives us things, and yet even when we take, it comes back up. So there's a sort of a history within the tree. We can see a connection between past and also future. So let's take a look at the actual Astro Dynamics of the weekend. The moon begins Saturday by tuning in with Chiron, the healing energy of Chiron, and Venus, but there's a little bit of discordant energy with Venus. She also aligns with fiery Mars. So we're already, I think, seeing some potential passion in the air. Later in the day, the moon trines with Saturn. It's a very, very flowing energy. So there's a lot of potential movement. But of course, remember, Saturn is involved with Uranus at the moment. This is the big, breakdown or breakthrough kind of dynamic that's going on in the background. And we're seeing a lot of change and a lot of what I would say accelerated change. Now, the moon is going to add her energy to this on Saturday. At the point when the moon is properly squared with the sun, so this is this point of review, she also aligns with watery Neptune, spiritual Neptune, but also emotional Neptune. Neptune happens also to be sitting opposite the sun. So I think you can see why I feel this is going to be quite an emotionally driven weekend with passions running high. And the sun is also not only opposite Neptune, but trining Pluto, the planet of rebirth. Also the planet where, sometimes the energy of Pluto brings things to the surface, helps us to look deeply at things, secrets will come out. So this sort of feels quite an interesting dynamic. Neptune can sometimes really give us spiritual illumination, but can also bring an element of confusion sometimes. It's why I feel very strongly that over this weekend, if there is any aspect of your world that feels confusing, or you're feeling very, very emotional or passionate about anything, it may be wise not to just act on that, but to take your time to be mindful and press the pause button and wait. So wait until you're clear about how you really think and how you really feel, without these powerful energies surging around in the background. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that we have a massive 10-hour void of course period where the lunar energy isn't being directed through the personality traits or the character of a sign. And she's not at that time also connected in with any of the other planetary collaborations in a strong manner. We can see here, literally there is this empty space. So I think it's going to be really interesting, depending on what's going on in the context, the unique circumstances of our own individual worlds, to see how this long void of course affects us. It could be very free-flowing, but bearing in mind the emotionality, we could also be feeling a bit uncontained. We might see some emotional spilling over going on around us. And, when we don't have that awareness, sometimes we just react. But if we do have that awareness ahead of time, which is one of the reasons I make these videos, we can be really thoughtful and mindful. We know this stuff is going to happen. We know what the energy is going to be like, so we can contemplate how best to use it. As the moon moves through Sunday and moves away from her last quarter position, she actually squares with expansive Jupiter. This isn't necessarily a particularly negative aspect, actually, even though a square can be discordant. But what I will say is Jupiter, wonderfully expansive Jupiter, is sitting opposite Mercury. This connection can sometimes lead to a bit of overthinking. So review is incredibly helpful. Pressing the pause button and observing any emotionality over the weekend is incredibly helpful, but don't pick yourself to pieces or overanalyze situations to the point where you add to any emotional confusion. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. I hope it is helping you to navigate your lives and to be aware of your own energy in terms of manifestation. After all, what we are is what we create. What we think is what we create. What we feel is what we create. And the lunar influence certainly brings in some really, really interesting dynamics for us to be conscious of. Super Souls, thank you for joining me. Thank you so much for being a part of this amazing community. Don't forget that I do post lunar updates on Facebook and on Instagram daily if you want to have just a little nudge and a reminder. And I look forward to seeing you for either some of the further moon updates or indeed some of the readings. Tons and tons of love. Thank you so much for liking, sharing, subscribing, and yeah, just have an amazing review weekend.